And welcome to another episode of Leadership Table Talk, a show designed to help you develop and improve your leadership and management skills and talents. I am your host, Dr. Mary Gillam, a retired Air Force colonel and former member of the Senior Executive Service Corps with the Department of Defense at the Pentagon. I am also the owner of Executive Leadership Enterprise and Management Services. In today's episode, I want to discuss attributes that grow leaders and build teams by using a new and innovative leadership game that I actually developed during my time at Georgetown University. The game is called the Leadership Build Zone. Its motto, building leaders and changing lives. Several months ago, I had the distinct pleasure of being interviewed in Santa Barbara, California by Jack Canfield, who many of you know as the co-author of the Chicken Soup of the Soul series. And he asked me about the game. And one of the questions that Jack asked that you will probably be interested in knowing is, what is the objective of this game? Well, this game is a new educational board game designed to help grow and develop emerging and current leaders. The objective of the game is to be the first player or team to collect all 20 leadership attributes, which is indicated on the score sheet that you get with the game. And so another question that was asked by another interviewer was this: how does playing the game build leadership qualities? Well, you see, the game was originated when I was at Georgetown, but I had did a lot of research on qualities and attributes of what makes leaders effective. And in 2014, I did a book called Gifted to Lead, 4 Steps to Releasing Your Leadership Potential. And in that book, I actually conducted a survey and I asked people that time, what are some of the qualities that you consider to be good qualities for leaders? And so based off of that survey, I was able to incorporate that input into the game. And I also learned a lot when I was at Georgetown. There was a book by Julian Barlin, and it was The Science of Leadership. But in that book, Julian talked a lot about research that had been conducted by others who had also looked at attributes of leaders. And so when I decided to develop the game, I wanted to not only look at attributes that make good leaders, but those attributes that also contribute to ineffective leadership. And so when I came up with the game, I incorporated that as well. And as a quick testimonial, here in the Washington, D.C. area, a government agency recently used this tool for their team building exercise. And what was really nice about it is that they assigned facilitators or experienced leaders to help guide those who did not have a lot of experience in leadership through the game. And what made it really interesting is that the attributes on the board that we will talk about today are the ones that really generated and stimulated conversation. And that's what the game is all about, to be that conversation starter, to be that tool that will get you talking about leadership in a way that goes beyond what you just read in books or study in your classrooms. And so with that in mind, we're going to now talk about some of those attributes that contribute to good, effective leadership. So one of the first things that pops up on the board when people are playing the game is active listening. Being an active listener. And you may ask, why is that important? Can you imagine having a conversation with somebody and you really know that they're not listening to you, even though you really would like for them to pay attention, but sometimes their mind gets to wandering? And I call that a sign of disrespect, because how are you going to engage in a conversation with somebody when you really haven't taken the time to listen to what they had to say? And in earlier talks with clients and so forth, I often identify that as being a leader with closed ears. If you want your people to contribute to the growth of your organization, you have to give them an opportunity to share their ideas with you. But if you're not willing to listen to what they have to say, then it will not enable you to grow your organization or allow people to have the freedom to speak up and to speak out. And so I often tell people that you, as a leader, you have to be an active listener. So now let's take a look at another attribute that we talk about when people play the game, and that is being a critical thinker. That is something that universities today are really focused on, making sure that people or understanding what it means to be a critical thinker, being able to analyze things, to think critical about things, not just taking things at face value, but spending that time to really decipher what it is that's going on, what is being presented to you. And as a leader, you have to develop that skill. When I was at Georgetown, one of the classes that I really enjoyed was a class on decision making. And the thing about that, I've often written about that since, is that you can develop a bias in your decision making. So you want to make sure that you identify those bias gaps that may exist as you are going through your leadership journey. So when it comes down to being a critical thinker, that's part of decision making. You have to understand or have a process that you've already identified that will help you to make solid decisions. Thinking through things is very important, not just accepting things at face value. So let's continue on, and as you play the game, one of the things that would happen is that as you go through, you can stop on the block that says good attributes. What happens there is then you flip a card, and then that card would also tell you about another attribute of leadership. Because you see, when I developed this game, I actually looked at over 100 different attributes of leadership. But as you can imagine, there was no way I could incorporate all of those on a game. But I wanted to continue the learning process so that as people play the game, they can continue to learn different aspects of leadership. And I often tell people when they're playing it, it's not about who wins, but it's what you learn in the process. It's not about the win, but it's about what you learn. Okay, so another attribute is inspire, motivate. You always hear that. People say leaders ought to be able to inspire their teams or motivate people or stimulate them to do things that will help grow not only themselves, but also your organization. And that is so important because as leaders, you have to be able to inspire others to do and to grow. And I think that that is a very good attribute that leaders ought to have, because there's many authors who have written on the fact that if you're not able to inspire people, then are you really leading? Because you're a measurement of leadership is your ability to inspire others to be able to help you with your vision and to be able to contribute to the good of the organization. So let's continue on, and another attribute that I'd like to share with you is being decisive, leads from the front. As a retired military officer, I can tell you that is something that was drilled into us as lieutenants on, but not only on the officer side, but on the enlisted side as well. We believe in leading from the front. But when it comes down to leadership, you have to be decisive. You have to be able to make a decision. One of the worst things that I just really don't really like is to go in and present something to somebody, and it takes forever and a day for them to make a decision. Part of leadership is to be able to make a decision. Sometimes you may not have the perfect solution, but we need to move forward, especially if we have a deadline. So you have to have the ability as a leader to make a decision, leading from the front. Okay, so let's continue on another attribute. But before we do that, as you move around the board, you could also stop on a spot that says bad attributes. I want to really talk about that real quick because it's very important. I think that as you develop your leadership skills and talents, it's not just important that you understand what contributes to good leadership. You should also recognize those things that can contribute to ineffective leadership. And as people play the game, they would stop here and they will flip a card. And that card will give them an example of what it means to be an ineffective leader. For example, if you are a leader and you're in your organization talking about other members of your team to other members of the team, that is not good leadership. Because you should not be discussing what's going on with somebody else, with another member of that team. That's a sign of disrespect. And there are all kinds of other things that can contribute to ineffective leadership. And so those are the kinds of things that you should also be aware of, especially if you want to grow as a leader. And so another attribute that we're going to talk about is being confident, but yet humble. That is so important, because I often tell people that if you want people to really believe in you and that you can take the team forward, then you have to be confident in your ability to lead. And so that means that if there are areas that you need to grow and develop, then you need to do that. But you need to also make sure that you understand that as a leader, people are putting their confidence in you. So you need to make sure that you exhibit the kind of attitude, if you will, positive, that you are confident in your ability to lead, but at the same time, remain humble. Because I've known a lot of people who were technically competent, technically brilliant, if you really want to be honest, but they did not understand that when it comes down to leadership, you want to make sure that you don't allow it to go to your head and you become the kind of leader that nobody wants to follow. So at this time, it looks like we're coming up on a break. Where did the time go? But please stay tuned and we will continue this conversation after the break. You don't want to miss it, so please stay tuned.
Teens today take on leadership roles on the court, in the classroom, and in the community. Leadership Fairfax is looking for rising high school juniors and seniors who want to take their skills to the next level. Since 1987, Leadership Fairfax has inspired, engaged, developed, and connected with more than 1,600 leaders at all stages of their careers. This summer, learn leadership skills for college and beyond from Fairfax County's best and brightest. Begin your journey today by visiting leadershipfairfax.org.
Welcome back to Leadership Table Talk. Before the break, we were actually talking about those attributes that contribute to effective leadership. And so before the break, we had stopped on confidence and being humble as one of the attributes. But now we're going to continue with our conversation here. And again, as people are playing this game called the Leadership Build Zone, they can also end up stopping on an attribute called Team Builder Award. I do want to spend some time there because I believe that as a leader, you need to recognize the members of your team. And if you are doing a good job for the organization, there's nothing more than giving somebody a commendation. And even you as a leader, doesn't it make you feel good when your boss says, "Good job, well done"? Oh, the kinds of things that I remember most about my time in the military, it was when my bosses would hand out those attaboys. The things that I saw them do were the things that I emulated as I moved up in rank, not only in the military, but outside as well, because I believe that you should award those for a good job done. Okay, another attribute that we're going to talk about is leaders. They value people. And that goes hand in hand with the Team Builder Award that I just discussed. As leaders, you have to value your people. You often hear people say, leaders or your teammates or your people are your most important asset. And often I ask people, are they really? Because it's really displayed in your actions how well you value your people. And so if you take time to commend them for a job well done, or take time to grow and develop them, allow them to grow and develop their leadership potential, then you're showing that you do value your people. You're putting your people first, because without the people, you can't get the job done. I spent all my career in the telecommunications and information systems business for over 30 years. And I can tell you this, even when it came down to developing code, you had to have a human sitting there, actually devising the code. And so I often tell people, even in our day of technology, you still need to have people on your team. And so let's ensure that as leaders, we value our people and the job that they do for us. Okay, another attribute that I like to discuss is leaders. They delegate and they empower. I remember when I came into the military, and we had this big movement at that time that really talked about empowering people to be able to do things in the organization, empowering them to make decisions at the lowest level. Well, I believe that that is important, because leaders, the art of genuine leadership is developing the next generation of leaders. And so you need to be able to delegate authority and empower people to take on those activities and to be able to do something. Because how in the world can you say you value your people and you want them to grow, and you're not willing to give them an opportunity to do something, to make a difference in the organization? You'd be surprised at what they do. When I wrote the book, Gifted to Lead, 4 Steps to Releasing Your Leadership Potential, I identified an example in there in which a young lady that used to work for me, and she was really, really quiet, but she was very talented, very talented. And I said, we really need to give her an opportunity to develop her leadership skills. And so I said, here's a project, and I want you to lead this project. Oh, but when she was willing to step out, she did a great job. She did a fantastic job. And she thanked me later for giving her the trust and confidence, empowering her to do the job. And that's exactly what I did. And I think that as leaders, we need to do that with our team. So again, moving around the board, this is a tool again to help to stimulate that conversation on what it means to grow and develop leaders. And so another attribute that you can discuss is leaders mentors others. Again, that goes with what I said, delegating and empowering, because you as a leader, you need to have someone that you're mentoring along the way. Because I often tell those of us in executive leadership positions that we're not going to be around forever. So you need to make sure that you're mentoring those who are coming up behind us and helping them to grow and develop their leadership skills and talents. But if you don't take the time to mentor, then are you really doing everything that you should be doing as a leader? So you need to really think about that, because mentoring is really important. Another attribute that I like to talk about is leaders ought to be trustworthy. Often we've heard people say, your word is your bond. I believe that leaders ought to exhibit the kind of behavior that says, I am trustworthy. You can count on me. If I need to be somewhere, I will be there on time. I can tell you the number of times that we have sat in meetings waiting on bosses to show up. And some of them just outside the door, and in many occasions just talking about nothing. But if you value your people, you ought to value the time that they have to do their jobs that you have assigned them to do. And so when you call meetings, you ought to show up on time. And for some reason, I remember this happening a lot when I worked in the Pentagon. People would be late for no reason. I served as a chief of staff. I served as a military assistant. I served in some key roles supporting some big time people. And yet sometimes I was very concerned about why are these people late? Because when I was an executive myself in very senior roles, you had people who kept you on cue, who always made sure that you were supposed to be where you were supposed to be. And I can tell you that as leaders, you need to make sure that you honor that. That is being just one example of being trustworthy, that people can depend on you, that you will be where you said you ought to be. And as we continue along this journey, let's look at what it means to be passionate about what it is that you're doing. If you are a leader, I love what Jack Canfield said once, and he said that leadership is about influence. And a means of being influential is that you really need to be passionate about what it is that you are trying to do in your organization. Because if you're not passionate about it, how can you influence anybody to want to get involved? That what you're doing really matters. So you should have some degree of passion about the area that you're working in, so that when you're out there trying to sell that to your staff or even those external to the organization, that passion will come across. You know, I love helping people to grow and develop their leadership skills and talents. And yet I spent all my time primarily in the IT business in the military. But what I found that I really enjoy today is helping people to really step out and be the leader that they were designed to be. Because who says you can't step forward and take charge? Who says that you have to always be back here and you can't move forward? But I enjoyed that. And that's why I spend a lot of time writing about leadership. I developed this game about leadership. I developed a model to help people to really grow their leadership potential. Because I've seen a lot of people, and I can tell you, you can spot it all over them, that they were designed to move forward, because it was that leadership potential was all over them. Oh, can you tell I'm really passionate about this? But let us continue on. And so as you go around the board, another spot that you would learn about in terms of attributes is we'll talk about what it means to be a good time manager. Leaders need to do that. Like I mentioned a while ago, when it comes down to meetings, I often say, is this meeting necessary? Is there some way that we can, first of all, put out an agenda and let people know what it's all about? And not only that, only invite those who really need to be there. Because one thing that I always had a problem with was you invite tens of, just a lot of people to meetings, and then there was no real, nothing really got accomplished. And it was like, well, why do we invite all these people and we're just kind of here and there's no real agenda and we get together? And I'm the kind of person, I like to do things and make sure that we're organized and all of that. And I think that's why I kept getting selected to go up and work in people's front offices and stuff like that, because I'm an organizer. I like to make sure that things are done right because I value people's time. And I think that as leaders, you have to do that. You have to be responsible not only to the people, but to the time, the resources, managing them appropriately, and all of that. So let's continue on before we run out of time here. The next attribute that I like to talk about very quickly is it says here that leaders are great communicators. If you're not able to communicate what it is that you want your team to do, you're not going to be successful. I can tell you that in a heartbeat. You need to develop your leadership skills, because it's not only important what you say, but how you say it. And so if you're trying to convince people that what we're doing really does matter, regardless of whether it's a for-profit organization or a nonprofit organization, you have to be able to communicate that value, and that people, again, they matter in your organization. I often tell people, do a strategic plan. I love strategic planning, because I said in that way you can really begin to identify how everybody fits into the overall scheme or the overall objective for the organization. And so it's very important that you learn how to communicate. And so finally, without having a lot of time here to talk about this, but integrity matters. Being honest, being respectful, or some of the other attributes that you will learn as you play this game, the Leadership Build Zone. So again, I want to thank you so much for watching the Leadership Table Talk show. As executive leaders, we are compelled to help grow and develop the next generation of leaders. I hope that this discussion today on the attributes that grow leaders and build teams will inspire you to continue on your leadership and management journey. So if you have any questions about today's show or like to find out more information, please contact me at my website, Dr. Mary Gillam, at executiveleadershipbiz, that's BIZ.com. Again, this is Dr. Gillam, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.